If you are only going to watch one video on YouTube giving step-by-step guidance on how to reverse inflate a paraglider, this is the one. I am going to cover everything you need to know and be aware of to be successful and safe out there, all in a succinct and easy to understand instructional video. So let's get after it. Super quick disclaimer, guys. I am not to be replaced by a USPPA rated instructor that is out on the field with you, giving you live feedback calls that keep you safe and progressing in the right direction in this sport. With that out of the way, let's begin by discussing our mental and physical preparation for our inflation. A quick point I'd like to bring up first and foremost when we're doing reverse inflations in higher winds is the importance of slack. If we do not keep enough slack in those glider lines, the likelihood that that wing is going to take off with you attached to it before you are ready goes up dramatically. So let's make sure that we are maintaining a good amount of slack to our glider the moment we pick up those risers to clip in. Before we can expect any sort of success with our reverse inflations, it's really important to understand when we should and should not clip into our glider. This is where knowing how to hand kite your glider can be a great asset to you. You'll have to stay tuned for the next video on this channel. But hand kiting does 5 super helpful things for us. One, it will sort out your lines for you as you inflate that glider. And if it doesn't, you can pre-flight your glider as that wing is up there, seeing if any lines are broken, and also knowing the tangles that you absolutely need to take care of before inflating your glider for real. The third thing it does for you is the wing, being a weather vane, will tell you exactly where that wind direction is coming from, as well as knowing exactly what that wind is doing 10 feet above you. It's effectively dipping your toes into the water and making sure that you are indeed safe to clip in. And lastly, it allows you to lay that glider down in an inflation-ready configuration. As I've mentioned briefly in my forward inflation video, we want to be sure that we're doing the proper clip-in for the given wind speed. We know that the minimum for reverse and maximum for forward really kicks on once we can hear the wind blowing in our ears. An attempt at a forward in winds greater than this is going to force us backwards, potentially busting a prop as we trip backwards onto our cage. So save yourself the embarrassment and understand the wind speed and what inflation type you should be performing. On the flip side of that, if your glider is getting blown across the field, turning into a big Tootsie Roll, this starts happening around 11 to 12 miles per hour, by the way, you know that conditions are too strong to clip in for forward or reverse. In other words, it's going to take quite a bit of skill and know-how to successfully get that glider over your head in a controlled manner. So if you are still a noob in the sport, I highly recommend waiting for conditions to die down a little bit before clipping in. So our comfortable reverse speed range lies between 6 and 10 miles per hour. Which segues us nicely into my next point of making sure those trimmers are set appropriately. While a neutral trim setting will probably be just fine for the lower end of the speed range, at the upper end, a neutral trim setting can cause this wing to be quite a force to reckon with. In other words, if our trims are neutral, our wing is kind of scooped neutrally, and as it enters that drogue chute position, once that wing leaves the ground, it can pull us quite strongly. So popping those trims out relieves some pressure that that wing is going to generate in that power zone and allows that glider to really slice through that power zone and comes up nicely without you being forced to chase it across the field. Our final step of preparation is the most important, and that is to take a deep breath and visualize the process. I know so many pilots that absolutely hate doing reverse launches because they get stressed out and confused because they don't think through the process ahead of time. If you honestly and diligently visualize, see the wing coming up smoothly, settling overhead, getting squared away, then you're much more likely to execute properly. Also, doing a visualization actually builds the synapses in your brain. It helps the neurons actually form so that when you do go out to the field and practice, it's going to feel like you've actually done it before. I recommend, especially to new students, to visualize every single inflation just before it happens. All right, our preparation is complete. Let's go into step one of reverse inflating the glider. So let's say we've got a nice and easy middle road wind speed of 8 miles per hour. I like to hold my A's in my right hand as I'm operating a left-hand throttle, so both of the A's will be resting in this hand symmetrically as I pull tension into the glider. I've observed pilots holding A's in either hand, which is okay, but you're way more likely to get things asymmetrical through that inflation if you're holding the A's in different hands. So both hands ensures that the A's, even if you pull down on them, at least they're going to stay symmetrical. As you're finding your center, if you pull some tension into those A's, you'll notice that the forward half of the wing actually starts to climb off the ground like a snake in a way. And this allows you to identify the wall. And we want to make this wall as level as possible. If our glider is coming up on this side, the right side, more than the left side, then we actually need to step to the left to get that wind directly into the center cells. In other words, if my right half is coming up sooner, that means my wind speed is coming off my left shoulder and entering the left side of the glider, stage left, if you will. So I need to step to get my back into that wind to flatten out that wall and build that wall perfectly. You get bonus points for your best Donald Trump impression as you do this, by the way. Once we have built that wall and we know that we are centered, we want to be sure that we're keeping our arms straight out, pulling tension on those carabiners. This ensures that we're engaging the harness and letting the harness do the work instead of allowing our biceps to take over and muscle through the situation. So straight arms all the way through the point of release. Getting slightly ahead of myself, let's get to step 2 first. With straight arms, it's time to start moving directly backwards into the wind. And depending on your wind strength, that wing is going to take this invitation to fly and immediately pop off the ground, and you'll be into the drogue chute position or the power zone position. To prepare for this position, between 9 and 10 o'clock, we want to lower our center of gravity to give this wing an anchor point to pivot from. Otherwise, if we're standing straight up, we have less flexibility. We have less give to provide that wing width as it comes through that power zone, and we can be forced to chase it downwind in an uncomfortable and, more importantly, uncool manner. So stay low and think of yourself as an anchor until that wing exits the zone of maximum pullage, technical term. So the wing is going through this power zone, and we want this glider to spend as little time as possible in this zone. If you think about a leaf or a feather falling through the air, it doesn't really have any sort of direction or aim. And this is exactly how your glider is behaving in the power zone. So we want to get that glider through the power zone, which means that with those A's in our hands and straight arms, we want to aim those A's just above the leading edge all the way to the point of release. Once you have gotten through the power zone, the wind and a reverse inflation should do a lot of the work for you. And we release those A's when we feel this glider coming out of that power zone. In other words, the glider communicates by releasing tension on those lines as it passes through that power zone. That's when we release those A's, and generally in a reverse inflation that happens right around 10 o'clock or so. So once you release those A's, you are ready for the control position. That glider should be settled right over your head, ready to go. So along with hand kiting, controlling the glider is going to be the next set of instructional videos that I put out for you guys. By the way, if these free videos are proving to be of any use to you, and maybe you feel a tinge of guilt that you don't have to pay for such incredible content, I have just the solution for you. Linked in the description below is my Patreon account, and I have a tier for just about any member who wants to monetarily support what I'm doing here. From simply pitching me some of your spare change, all the way up to being able to connect with me on a monthly basis via video chat, where we can discuss any myriad of topics that help you progress in the sport. Okay, so let's recap everything that we've talked about in the video so far. First, we found our center on that wing to make sure that this wing is going to inflate symmetrically. And then we've lowered that suspension and made ourselves into an anchor for this wing to pivot upon. Then, thinking about leading the leading edge with straight arms, we are letting the harness do the work as this glider comes all the way through the power zone. And once it releases out of that zone, we release the A's and assume our control position. Before you click off this video, I do have some pro tips for you guys regarding reverse inflations. My first bonus tip for you guys is to monitor the wing angle as it's coming through the power zone. As I mentioned before, the wing tends to weather vane into the wind, but it also does this early on through the power zone. So if you keep an eye on that middle cell, I know, read between the lines. If you keep an eye on that middle cell as it comes through that power zone, if it starts leaning to the right, you know that you can get a leg up on this control phase by stepping right early on to get this wing to come up more straight and level. My second bonus tip for you guys is to do this all the time. Through this repetition, we gain a really keen understanding as to what that wind is doing at the wind speeds and how our wing is going to react to that wind speed. Having this understanding can help us stay relaxed and breathing through our inflation, which segues us nicely into bonus point number 3, which is to let the harness do the work for you. As I mentioned earlier in the video, we keep straight arms to keep tension on the carabiners to allow the harness, our body, and the weight of the motor to do the work for us. That way we're just observing and we're easily controlling that glider through that inflation. Here's my reminder to you guys that you are not fighting the glider. As you bring up that wing, you're not pulling that wing towards you, closing the leading edge, but letting her gulp clean air all the way through. And even though the inflation might be fast and violent and potentially loud as that glider comes to life, this is not an excuse to tense up. The more you can breathe, relax, let the weight of your body and the harness do the work for you, the more controlled and put together the wing is going to appear. Your mental and physical posture is contagious to the glider. The glider is going to mimic you, and the more calm and collected you can be, the better that wing is going to come up and get in that control phase in the same way. I sincerely hope these tips, as well as the visuals, are helpful and useful to your own experience. If they are, consider bumping into that like and subscribe button, and if you're feeling extra inspired, share the video with someone who might benefit from this as well. If you have any questions, fire them at me down below in the comment section. I'm always so excited to respond to any comments, questions, or concerns you may have. If you guys are still with me, thank you so much for watching to the end. You are the MVP. This is Lifted PPG. My name is Micah Stevens. Don't forget to take that deep breath, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers.